Hello, and welcome to NotesIn9. I'm David Leedy. Episode 47, Introduction to XPages and Relational Data. And they lived happily ever after. Okay, in this show, John Jardin, a frequent contributor to NotesIn9, comes back on, and I'm very appreciative for everything that he's done. He's been by far a very prolific contributor, and he always brings us great stuff. And he works in South Africa for a company called Ukuvuma. And today he's going to talk about using the extension library with and the new pieces for relational database access through JDBC. And he's going to, I believe, do some CRUD operations on a DB2 database. And with that being said, let's get right to the demo.
Hi everyone and welcome to this video. I'm John Jardin from Ukuvuma, and today I'm going to show you how to integrate your XPages application with DB2. I'll be dividing this tutorial into two videos. In the first one, we'll focus on configuring your XPages application to communicate with DB2, and we'll also perform a few basic operations like creating, reading, updating, and deleting records in DB2 directly from XPages. In the second video, we'll get a little bit more technical, and I'll show you how to dynamically create and update data using field mappings and dialogues. Okay, so first off, we need to make sure you have the following in place before we start this tutorial. You'll have to have an installed DB2 environment with a database to integrate with. I've got DB2 over here, and I created a test demo database with nothing extra that I really did to it. The second thing is you'll need to have a Domino 853 server, and we will have to have the XPages 853 extension library installed on the Domino server and in your Domino designer. Um, we'll also be using the update site database, which featured in Domino 853 and which is used to install OSGI plugins on the Domino server. So I'm hoping that you have all of this in place. In my blog, I will give you references in the event that you are missing one or two of these installations and configurations. So I will point you to the right places in order to get this up and running. Okay, so once you have this in place, then we can begin. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install the JDBC driver, and this is actually quite easy. Here's the URL link. It's basically on the OpenNTF site. If I go over there, you'll see on OpenNTF, if you navigate to the XPages extension library, there's actually in the discussion section, one of the topics, where are you? Oh, there we go. One of these topics actually holds the DB2 driver as an OSGI installation or as an OSGI plugin. So what we need you to do is we need you to download the zip file. All right, I'll have all the links, everything on my blog. Then once you've downloaded that, you can extract the contents, and you should see this, a site.xml, plugins and features. So from here, what we're going to do is inside Lotus Notes, inside the update site database, we're going to want to import this site. So by clicking on here and clicking on browse, you will navigate to the site.xml, which was extracted from this db2 driver update site zip file. Okay, so once you click on that site.xml, then you'll see this inside your view. Now on my side, I had it already and I just disabled it, so it should be enabled already on your site. So if it's not, then you just click on the enable features. Okay, so now that we've enabled this, we'll have to restart the HTTP task. So what I'll do is I'll go over here and I will just say restart task HTTP. There's a difference between telling the HTTP restart and doing a restart task HTTP. It's important that you use this one. Alright, so what it's doing over here is it's actually installing the DB2 plugin. And once it reaches the point where it says HTTP server started, we can actually run a command called tell HTTP OSGI session extlib driver.db2. This, when you run this, it will actually tell us if the DB2 has been installed, and there it is. Okay, cool. So now that's out of the way. Next up, let's see on our list, we've got that installed. We're going to now go and set up our DB2 environment. Okay, so there's three important things that we need to do over here. Number one, we're going to have to make sure that the username that you plan on using to connect to DB2 has the correct privileges, and we'll go and configure that now. So inside the DB2 environment in your database, you'll see that there are DB users under the users and groups objects. When you click on there, you'll see in most cases DB2 admin will be there and then your default user. All right, now the one thing that I learned the hard way, and thanks to my Microsoft developer we managed to figure out, is that DB2 admin, if you have your own personal account, DB2 admin doesn't have all the rights that you would think it does for the database. So we actually need to go and enable this. And we do that by clicking on Change User Privileges for DB2 Admin. And we need to go enable Database Administrator Authority and Security Administrator Authority. Okay, once you've got those two enabled, you can click on OK. So next up, we have to go and create a schema. Okay, and you do that by going to the schema section. There's a whole bunch of them that already exist. I think for safety purposes, it's better if you just create your own schema that you can use when communicating with your tables. So I'm just going to create one, and I can call it whatever. I can call it J Jardin, and I'm going to use DB2 admin as my authorization name. Okay, so there's J Jardin. So once the schema has been created, we can now go and create our table. So I'm going to call the table user profiles. I'm going to go and change this here to J Jardin. You see the schema. And I'm going to go call the table user profiles. And we're going to create three columns. Okay, the first one is going to be called ID. I'm going to use integer. I'm going to make it an identity, which means it's going to automatically create a value. We'll start the value at 1 and it must increment by 1. Okay, so I click on apply and that's out of the way. Then I want another column called first name. We're going to change it to a varchar and we'll allow 100 characters just to be safe. It's not nullable, so we'll leave it like that, but whenever you force a field value, you have to have a default value. So we're going to have to go and say default value null. Okay, so we can go apply there, and then we can go say last name varchar 100. That's fine. We can make this nullable, which means it doesn't have to have a default value. So I'm going to click on apply, and once we're done with those, all I'll need to do is specify key. So I'm going to go click over here and we're going to say okay, fine, let's make the ID field our primary key. There we go. So once we've done all of that, we can click on finish, and that's our table created and out of the way. Good stuff. So if I just go over here and I do Control F, I can say user profiles, and there it is. Okay, now you need to remember this, the schema J Jardin and the table name user profiles. All right, so we'll get to that now. Next up, we need to configure JDBC in your Lotus Notes database. So we're going to go here to Domino Designer, and I've got a little bit of an R&D database that hasn't been configured for DB2 yet. Before I go there, I just want you to take a quick look at my XPage application properties. I've set it over here so that I compile this application to run 3, and under advanced, I've got the extension library selected. Okay, so just make sure that that's in place for you. So once you've done that, also go and open up the XPages perspective. And what that will do is it will default the Package Explorer tab on top here. Okay, so once that tab's open, you'll see there's your database, and navigate down to the WebINF or Web Content WebINF folder. All right, so what we need to do here is we're going to need to go and create a new folder. So you go new, other, and go choose folder. We're going to call this folder JDBC. This is a once-off configuration for the database. Okay, so there's my JDBC folder, and now inside this folder, I'm going to go and create a file. So it's new, other, and under general, I'm going to go and choose file. I'm going to call the file db2.jdbc. Now, if you've ever worked with an ODBC connection before, whenever you create the connection and you point towards your driver, you would have to give the connection a name. Now, in this case, our db2.jdbc, the DB2 part becomes our connection name, and we will use this in our code when communicating with DB2. All right, so I'm going to say finish, and it's going to open up an empty page over here. Now all we need to do is add a couple of lines of XML that's going to make our database connect to DB2. And I'm just going to paste this over here, and I'll go through it shortly. So the first tag is the JDBC tag. We open and we close it. The second tag is the driver tag, where you go and specify the JDBC driver. The third one is the URL. Okay, so we access DB2 using the JDBC URL, and it's standardized to be jdbc://db2://. So that's quite standard. I'm working on local, so I actually just specify local host. You could also specify your computer name, and if I'm not mistaken, you can even specify 127.0.0.1. In the event that you're pointing towards a physical server, you would use that server's host name. Okay. The default port is also 50,000. You can go and change that manually, but if I understand correctly, the default is 50,000. All right, so that's fine. And then the last part is the database name, which is test demo. This is the database I created, test demo. Okay, so that's out of the way. I'm using the db2 admin user, and this is my password for the db2 admin. Okay, so now I've created this. I can now say, yes, I want to save this. I'm going to go to the database, and I'm going to go and build it. All right. Next up, we're now going to go and create our XPage. So we're actually almost done. And I've got a few examples here already so that I can just copy and paste it. We use a Json array in order to actually map the columns that we want to populate in DB2. And I'll show you this now in a second. So let's go to XPages, and we're going to click on New XPage, and I'm just going to call it DB2 Test. All right, there we go. I'm going to click on OK. And as a best practice, I'll start off by adding a panel, and I'll call this panel DB2. All right, so I'm going to put everything inside this panel. I'm going to create another panel inside there for my buttons, and I'll call this panel buttons. Okay, good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create 3 buttons. I'll start off with the add record, and then I will go and add another one to update record, and a third one to delete record. All right, I'm going to be hard coding the functions a bit, and like I said, in our second video, I'll show you how to dynamically integrate with DB2 using all kinds of field mappings, dialogues, and a couple of cool features. Okay, but for now, this will do. Okay, so add record. I'm going to go to the events section, and what we're going to do is we're just going to add some server-side JavaScript. So I'm going to copy this over here, and then I'll explain what it does. All right, so I'm going to paste that over there, and let's just take a quickly look at this. All right, so this is a Json array, and I'm going to store it in a variable called myData, and basically I'm mapping the first name column to a value John, and the last name column to the value Jardin. I don't have to worry about the ID because it auto-generates itself. So once I've mapped this as a JSON array, I can then go to @Jdbc Insert db2. Remember, this is the name of the file, the db2.jdbc, and then the table name, which is our schema name that we created, dot table name. So Jardin dot user profiles. That will point the insert function to the table. And then finally, we pass the array. So what this will do is it will go and map the column names to the values that we provided it. Okay. So I can click on OK over there. And let's go to the update record as well. So I'm going to go and copy this. Go to the update record, choose script editor, and let's paste this in. Now, what I did over here is I'm still using a JSON array, and you'll see that I've changed the values from John Jardin to Sean Smith. And instead of using a Jdbc insert, I'm using a Jdbc update. I still point to the DB2, which is my connection to the DB2 environment. And I am referencing jjardin.userprofiles. Why is it doing that? Okay, so this is my table. I pass the JSON array, but now I also have to map the record that I'm trying to update. So what I'm doing over here is I'm saying go look for the ID column, or go look in the ID column and map it to the first, or to the ID 1. Okay, so that will connect me to the relevant row inside the DB2 table, and it will go and update the data over there. Cool. So that one's out of the way. Then the delete, which is actually the easiest of all three. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go to the delete script editor, and I'm going to paste this. So we use an @jdbc delete, the connection record or the connection name, and we go and provide the table jjardin.userprofiles. Again, what column are we referencing? We're going to reference the ID column, and we're going to look for value 1, or ID is equal to 1. All right. So now, the only thing that we'll need to do is, in fact, we don't need to do anything. From here, we can click on Build Project. There we go. And let's go and preview this. Okay, so we won't be able to see anything over here, but I can go and click on Add Record. And it did a load, but what I can do is I can go back to the Db2 environment. I'll go and just find User Profiles. And if I double click in here, there's my record I just created. Okay, so that's perfect. Now, I want to go and test the update record. So I'm going to click on this. All right, no errors. No errors is always a good thing, okay? Usually when there's a single problem, you'll start getting all kinds of SQL DB2 errors all over your page. If I go inside here, it changed the value to Sean Smith, so that we now know that our update is working. And finally, if I click on delete record, there should be nothing left inside this table. Great. So the last thing we're going to do as part of this tutorial for part 1 is we're just going to create a table, a view panel, where we can actually go and see the data that we're creating. All right, so I'm going to go back to the Domino Designer, and inside my DB2 panel, I just want to go get it inside there. All right, we're going to go and add a view. And I'm going to say to select the data source later, otherwise it doesn't give me the option to choose a JDBC query data source. So I'm going to say to select data source later. All right, and that gives me this. It's view panel 1. We need to remember that name. I'm just going to stretch this out. I'm going to say 100%. And I'm going to change the header. I'm just going to say the header is going to be first name. And over here in the column name over here needs to be the column name inside the table that we're going to reference, which is going to be first_name. So what am I doing? I'm referencing the first_name column over here. Great. So now that I've done that, the only thing that I need to do here is map the view panel to a data source, or I need to create a data source, sorry. So I go to the data tab of the view panel, and I can go and say show data from JDBC query. That's going to open up this over here, and we need to populate the following. Number 1, connection name. This is DB2. This is the connection db2.jdbc that we created. Okay. The second value that I'm going to populate is the scope. It's a view scope as a default, so I'm going to go and change this to a request scope, so that if I do perform a partial refresh on the table, that it will reload the data from DB2. Otherwise, it's going to keep the data until I close and open up the XPage. So we need to change the scope to request. Okay. The SQL table, that is jjardin.userprofiles. It is our table in our schema that we created. And I think that's all that we need for now. Let me see if I missed anything. Yeah, that's it for now. Okay, so if I go to the add record, obviously if I go and build this and I go and preview this inside the browser, here's my table, but if I click on add record, nothing happens, even though data got added to the table now inside DB2. And the reason for that is because we're not performing any kind of update on the page. So if I go here to the events on the click, I can go and say, okay, fine, let me do a partial update, and I will partially update the DB2 panel. Okay, so let me save that. Let me build the project, and let's try again. Now I can tell you now, this is going to kind of work. If I refresh the page, you'll see there's the value that I added initially. If I go and click on add record, nothing happens. But if I click on it again, now something happens. And the problem with this is it's one record delayed. So even though you see 3 records over here, there's actually 4 sitting behind the scenes. And the reason for that is because it's performing the partial update before it actually adds or reloads the view. So it's useless to go and perform a partial update here. What we need to actually do is we need to perform the update on the completion of this function. Okay, so there's a special way to do this. The first thing that you need to do is change this from a partial update to a no update. Okay, a no update means it still performs an update on the page, but it doesn't reload the page. It doesn't really perform a callback to the server, but it does perform an update in sort of a simple term. Now you'll need the outline for this, okay? Over here you can see my button 1. If I expand this, you'll see an event handler. And if I click on this and go to the properties tab, you'll see some hidden events that don't show themselves unless you click on the event handler in the outline page. And one of them is on complete. This will ask some client-side JavaScript. And what we're going to do here is we're going to copy this beautiful piece of code. And we're going to paste it inside here. And what this does is it performs a partial refresh via client-side script. And it takes 2 parameters. This one over here on the right is a default, just keep it like that. And the first parameter is the name of the ID that you want to refresh, in other words, our panel. And you have to pass it as an ID binding expression, because remember, we're working with client-side JavaScript. You can't just say panel db2. You have to pass it as an ID binding expression. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to perform our server-side JavaScript function, and once it's done that, it's going to perform this refresh on the page. So if I now go click on OK, save this, and build my project, and go preview this in the browser, you'll see we have 4 records, but if I go click on add, it goes and immediately updates our view, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so we're happy with that. And I'm sure you'll all agree that update and delete will work just the same. But just in case you have doubts, let's go and do this quickly. We change it to no update. We go to the event handler. We go to the onComplete function. And we paste this partial refresh post. Go to the delete record. No update. Oh, that was actually performing a full update. Okay, never mind. On complete and partial refresh post. Alright, so that's sorted out. If we just quickly go and take a look at some of the IDs over here, what I'll do is I'm going to change ID 3 from John Jardin to Sean Smith, and I'm going to delete ID 4. I'm going to delete the 4th one. Okay. Now, or the 3rd entry, which is ID 4. So if we go over here, update record, I'm going to say ID 3, I want to modify, and delete record, I'm going to say ID 4, I want to delete. Alright, so this will be our final test. Project build. I'll go back to the browser, do a refresh, and we're now going to click on update. There we go. It changed John to Sean. If we go take a look over here, it changed ID 3 to Sean. Thank you. And we're going to delete this one over here. And it's gone. Great. So this is the end of part 1, and this proves that we can communicate directly with DB2 without having to go via back-end Lotus Notes forms, views, or save data. So we're definitely happy that we can communicate directly, and I'll leave it at this, and in the second video I'll show you how to turn this into a dynamic X page where we're actually using dialogues and we're clicking on links and we're just doing all sorts of excellent stuff and working directly with DB2. So thank you for your time. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, happy coding. Bye-bye.
And that's the demo. If you have any questions for me, here's my information, and I thank you for your time.